many of you would have seen, perhaps even read the white paper that came out last week, and there were lots of joined up thinking, which was pleasing to see, and mentions of things like skills for jobs, lifelong learning, driving growth, and in particular, the greater involvement of employers in designing technical courses to ensure there is a link of skills to real jobs to close the skills gap, and most importantly, from your perspective as an employer, to get that return on investment. So with that thought in mind, there's been lots of changes in the apprenticeship space, particularly in digital. I remember back in 2015-16 when the Trailblazer groups that I was part of first started to design these apprenticeships. So it's no surprise that ours have particularly come up for review early. And as James says, I'm delighted that Alison, Pearce and BCS is sparing us half an hour of a time today to go through in quite some detail the changes to those standards. As always, you will get a copy of the slides and this recording afterwards, so feel free to take notes, but there will be details. I'm also joined by my colleagues Sam Tobin and Julie Clark, who will give you a similar update with regards to the management and project management apprenticeships. For those of you who are familiar with this, thank you very much for joining us once again. To those of you that are new to the Just IT group, we started 20 years ago. In fact, it'll be our 20th anniversary in March. We're delighted to say. We started as a training company, and that's still very much at the heart of what we do, helping both individuals and corporate clients to upskill their staff. We added a recruitment services team that's still a vital part of our offering, and indeed I had a conversation with a gentleman today who's looking for us to help with a head of IT role. And we added the apprenticeship arm back in 2011, so 10 years worth of experience there in terms of the apprenticeship space. If you're not familiar with this, if you could move on to the next slide for me, James, I thought it was just worth sharing a few facts about our organisation. We did some totting up of the number of years experience in both our delivery and our account management teams. And we're proud to say we've got over 450 years worth of experience in the apprenticeship space. And of those, 200 of those have actually been whilst we've been working for Just IT. So we'd like to think we bring lots of experience to bear in helping our employers design solutions for whatever their needs may be at the time. We're also very proud of the fact that about 70% of our apprenticeship starts are repeats with customers who come back to us time and time again, which would suggest that obviously a lot of what we're doing meets their needs. And since 2001, we've helped over 10,000 people start their careers in the tech and digital space, which is something to be really proud of. And 70% of our current apprentices on program are with kind of 20% of our key accounts that we support across the country. I've been in the recruitment and apprenticeship space now for something like 27, 28 years, and I think we're fairly unique as an organisation in being able to help at whatever stage you're at, whether it be with hiring new talent, training, developing them, retaining them, and obviously upskilling them through the pace. Okay. I'm going to hand back to you now, James, and if you would be kind enough to launch our first poll.
Thank you very much, Richard. So we are going to launch our first poll today, and this is all. The first poll is: how will COVID impact your organisation's use of apprenticeship programs? So what I'll do, I'll launch that poll to you right now, and I'll give you, say, 10 seconds to complete the relevant answer. I'll count you down from, we've got quite a few votes coming in, fantastic. I'll count you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I will close that, and Richard, I will share the results with you right now.
Thank you very much indeed. So good to see some real levels of engagement there across the piece, I think, really, in terms of apprenticeship. Only 7% saying they won't use them at all. So that's really encouraging that the vast majority of people on the call really see the value of apprenticeship, which is fantastic. Okay, what I'd like to do now is get into the meat of the topic today and invite Alison, Pearce to join us to have a look at the future of digital apprenticeships. Alison, if you'd like to to come off mute, perhaps introduce yourself, explain your background at BCS, and then I'll hand over to you to walk us through the slides and the changes in the space. Over to you, Alison. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. My name is Alison Pearce. I'm the Quality Delivery Manager, as you can see on the screen, at BCS. I do have a technical background. However, my role now is to ensure that the endpoint assessment process holds the apprentice at the heart of it, to make sure we give them the best possible opportunity, both through the endpoint assessment process and also by supporting employers and training providers to make sure that the opportunity on programme is also the best that the apprentice can possibly have. And it's something that Just IT and BCS have been working on very, very closely to make sure that the apprentice has the opportunity to achieve the best possible result. Next slide, please. What I'm going to do, and it is pretty much a whistle-stop tour of everything going on in digital apprenticeship, so I'm going to sort of go through everything, and I'm more than happy to answer questions if anybody has any. But at present, all of the apprenticeship standards within the digital sector have the same footprint in as much as they all follow the same process. They have pre-gateway requirements for knowledge modules, English and maths, an employer reference and a summative portfolio, at which point the apprentice goes into the EPA period. They complete a synoptic project of their and your choosing. And this again is submitted, and the interview is a holistic assessment to make sure that the apprentice is competent within the standard and has met the requirements of the standard and the wider occupational brief. The landscape is shifting quite dramatically in as much as each standard is completely unique in the approach it takes to assessment. All of the assessment for the apprentice is taking place post-gateway. So any interview or any knowledge tests or modules will still be post-gateway in a predefined window. So I'll come on to that. There are a variety of different assessment methods. There are a variety of different names for the assessment methods. It could be an interview, it could be a professional discussion, it could be a presentation with questioning. They are all classed as different assessment methods. There are defined assessment methods, whereas historically everything was holistically discussed, reviewed, and considered as evidence of competence. Each assessment method has key criteria against which the apprentice is assessed, and they will only ever be assessed once on each core criteria. Evidence submitted for the wrong assessment method cannot be considered. So it's quite rigid on the approach, and it isn't holistic. Each assessment method needs to be passed for the apprentice to be given an overarching grade. A big differentiator, which I know has been quite popular with some of you as employers, are that there are no vendor certifications embedded within the programme. The knowledge modules that were pre-gateway could be vendor certifications, Microsoft, Cisco, CompTIA, but they have now all been removed as it is not thought that they should be publicly funded. As I've already stated, the EPA window is defined by the assessment plan, by IFATE, for the new standards, and the apprentice is required to achieve all of the different assessment methods for that standard within that window. If there is a requirement or they don't achieve that particular assessment method, there is now an option to resit or retake, which is a big differentiator as well. Do they just need to go back through because they messed up on the day, or do they actually need to go back into the workplace, have additional learning and practice of their skills to ensure that competence? The resits and retakes on the whole need to be completed within the EPA window, or the apprentice will need to start the whole thing again. At present, if they fail, they can take their time to go back through a resit and generate all the additional evidence. Now there is a defined window in which they need to achieve every single aspect. Okay, next slide, please. As I said, each new standard can have multiple different assessment methods, but it is a requirement that everyone has two. The timings can vary, but in general, knowledge, skills and behaviours, KSBs, which are probably something you'll be hearing frequently moving forward. The KSBs are unique for an individual assessment method, as I've already said, so therefore can only be assessed once. We BCS cannot assess them in any other way. So it's important that the apprentice is ready to go when they get to Gateway, because there is no opportunity post Gateway for them to take their time to review what they've done. Okay, so next slide, please. Now here it says, you know, the assessment methods may include portfolios. Now I'm just going to focus on portfolios. You're all familiar with those, and the apprentices have all put them together. Some of the new standards, there is no longer a requirement for a portfolio. Where there is a requirement for a portfolio, it isn't assessed in its own right. So we are anticipating that the focus will move away from portfolios within a workplace, and people will just, you know, carry on with the day-to-day work and then try and talk about it at interview. My recommendation, having overseen over 10,000 EPAs, is that they still maintain some sort of portfolio regardless of whether one is actually required, because it enables them to reflect on what they've done, the areas they've improved in, and the activities that they completed when they're required to discuss it potentially 2 years down the line. There are knowledge modules or tests or units, and there are a variety of different names across the new assessment plans. These are currently in place. They are still post-Gateway. They're still online tests, but IFATE are currently reviewing the value of these for some of the particular standards. There are case studies where BCS will either set a scenario or they'll be required to carry out a case study that is work-based. There could be a project, which is a simulated scenario, or it could be a work-based one. There are demonstrations, practical assessment, observations. There are so many different assessment methods now that it is important to take the time to understand what the apprentice is required to do at the beginning of the programme to make sure they have maximum exposure and support to enable them to achieve. Next slide, please. Okay, let's have a look now at the standards that have been revised. So the first standard is the Level 3 Infrastructure Technician. It's now going to be called the Information Communications Technician Apprenticeship. And instead of being a one-size-fits-all, there are now 3 pathways embedded within it: a support technician, a network technician, and a digital communications technician. This is to allow the apprentices potential progression to a higher level for their chosen career pathway. There is still a portfolio required. And as I said before, there are no knowledge assessment methods on this particular standard, but the 2 assessment methods that have been allocated are a professional discussion, which from the assessment plan clearly identifies it as being similar to the interview that they currently go through, and there is a work-based project and questioning on that work-based project. All of that needs to be completed successfully within a 4-month EPA window. Okay, next slide, please. Network engineer, again, portfolio is still required. There are no knowledge tests embedded. And I'm putting that because some of them have sneaked in the assessment method. So I just want to make it clear for each standard, if this is pertinent to your apprentices, what the requirements are. Assessment method, there is a simulated assessment followed by questioning. And there is also a professional discussion underpinned by the portfolio, but the portfolio is not marked. On the current standards, the portfolio is marked. And because this is a level 4 apprenticeship, the EPA window can stretch from 3 to 6 months. However, something to note is the fact that it is anticipated, and IFATE have yet to clarify, but it is anticipated that all of both assessment methods must be completed for the first time within 3-month window. Next slide, please. Software developer, again, it's still a level 4 standard. There is still a portfolio and no tests, but this one is a work-based project whereby the apprentice will identify a project they're going to work on in the workplace, carry it out in the workplace, and then they will submit that to the assessor for marking and also be answering questions on it as part of one assessment method. So rather than put 3 assessment methods in, what the Trailblazer group have done is they've taken one assessment method and broken it into 2 components. So there's quite a lot of assessment and additional work required for that assessment method. And then the professional discussion underpinned by the portfolio is very similar to the scenario, but again, portfolios are no longer marked. And this has an EPA window of 6 months because the work-based project is anticipated to last 6 to 8 weeks. Next slide, please. One thing to note is that these assessment methods where the apprentice is required to carry out a project in the workplace, time will still need to be allocated to the apprentice to enable them to do that. The idea is that the project will be work-based, so it will be part of their day-to-day role anyway. Cyber level 4, they're again portfolio and no tests, but there are now 3 pathways. What the Trailblazer group have done is they have consolidated the cyber standards that were already in place, the cybersecurity technology, which had 2 pathways, plus the cyber intrusion analyst, and they've created 1 standard with the 3 pathways. This is a very heavily assessed standard. There is the professional discussion. There is also scenario demonstration assessment method, whereby they are given blind scenarios which they have to respond to and answer questions on during the assessment. They have to generate a report. And there is a knowledge test, but the format of it is going to be slightly different. So it's not the format necessarily that they would be familiar with. Again, we're waiting for wider clarification on how that will finally be assessed. The EPA window on this for 4 assessment methods is very tight. It's 3 to 6 months. And again, it is anticipated that all 4 assessment methods will be completed within that first 3-month window. Okay, next slide, please. Data analyst, again, portfolio. There's no direct knowledge assessment methods, but they put in what they call a knowledge test, which is, again, it's not the formal exams format and the requirement that we're looking for, although there is some element of testing in there. I'm sorry, there is some errors on this slide, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, and I'll just move on to, can we move to the next slide? And then I'll come back onto that one. Okay, the ISBA standard, which is still being revised. We were anticipating there would be a new assessment method in place by now. Unfortunately, that hasn't been done. So as far as we're concerned, that is still outstanding. The digital marketer, I need to ask for some support here from yourselves. The digital marketer is currently under review as to whether the standard is going to continue. There are ideas that it will be changed to just a generic marketing apprenticeship, and there are other options sort of put into place that would basically stop the digital marketing being revised. And if you think it's a standard that you would like to put your apprentices on, then we would ask that you contact Just IT with your support, and we can pass that on to the Trailblazer group to identify the value of that particular apprenticeship program to the Trailblazer group. The last one is the software development technician. Again, the assessment plan is still pending. So we can't give you exact details of that. We have had some idea, but what I don't want to do is share with you information that may well change until it's been fixed into an assessment plan. Just going back from my memory to the data analyst, there are 2 assessment methods for the data analyst. There's a project with presentation and questioning. So the project will be allocated or be selected by the apprentice. They will send in a project specification, and they will then send in a presentation which they will deliver live to an assessor, and they'll be asked questions on that. There is also professional discussion which is supported by the portfolio they submitted, but again, the portfolio will not be marked. The project report is a formal report. It requires the formality of an academic report, and it has a specified word count. The assessment will take about, on that method, will take about 50 minutes. The professional discussion will be about an hour, which is similar to what the apprentice is having now, but as I said, it's a professional discussion with underpinned by the portfolio, but not marked. One thing also to note is, and this is why it's so essential to prep the apprentice to go through Gateway, is that for a resit or retake, I-FATE have now started to cap the grade that the apprentice can achieve. So at present, the apprentice can fail their EPA, go back through EPA and achieve a distinction. In some of the new standards, and each one is different, and we've had a couple of them change already. At the moment, some of them will now be capped at a pass. Some of them are still open where the apprentice can achieve a distinction. So it's really essential that everything is ready at Gateway, that the declaration is reviewed, the apprentice's experience is discussed with them at Gateway to give them that opportunity to achieve within that time limited window. Okay, next slide, please. Just going to have a quick look at the new standards. There are 6 new standards that have been launched. They are all live, but I'm going to just talk about the ones that I think are more pertinent to yourselves. So next slide, please. Again, note the duration of the assessment window. It's essential on these new standards, because they are not based on the originals, they're completely new, that you provide wider support on exposure. Make sure that the apprentice gets to experience and gain competence in all of the areas of the standard. What we're trying to look at for the new standards, because it is all post-Gateway and it's the apprentice basically doing it themselves, they are totally on their own. They don't have necessarily the support that they may have had from Just IT and the team at Just IT. Once they're in Gateway and they've gone through Gateway, we need to make sure that they engage more with what they should be doing, what the requirements are, where they're progressing to, how their evidence is put together, how they have gained competence. They really do need to take more personal responsibility for what they're doing at all levels. Still, I would recommend they are given support in developing portfolios, encouraged to keep journals, to keep logs, screen captures, details of activities, just to prompt them at interview, even though that aspect, it may not be required and is most definitely not marked. Also, because the EPA windows are so tight, it's worth considering when the apprentice goes through Gateway, do you have a busy period coming up within the business? Is it an advisable time to put them into Gateway when they're going to be taken out of the business for these assessments, or is it worth delaying? It's a discussion you would need to have with the apprentice and also with Just IT. Okay, next slide, please. So the first new standard I'm going to talk to you about is the data technician. It's designed to progress into the data analyst at level 4. There are a lot more progression pathways now with the new standards, and it's basic data manipulation. There are 2 assessment methods, scenario demonstrations, which will be provided to the apprentice, and they will carry out demonstrations for, and there are two at 40 minutes. So each one is 45 minutes with questioning. There's also the professional discussion, which is approximately an hour. Each of the assessment methods allows a discretionary 10% increase in time, but these timings, all the timings given now, are a minimum. There is a portfolio required, and you are required to give a reflection. Historically, you've done an employer reference. Now it's just pretty much a testimonial as to their behaviours. Not what they've done, but how they've done it, who they've worked with, you know, what they've done best, how they've grown, how they've developed, that kind of reflection. And the EPA window for this is 3 months to achieve both assessment methods successfully. Next slide, please. The IT Solutions Technician, level 3, it's potentially an alternative to the Infrastructure Technician or the Information Communications Technician, as it will be. There are 2 pathways. There's a hardware pathway and a software. So it makes it much easier to identify the standard that you're going to put the apprentice on, because there is more choice. This one is heavily knowledge tested. There are 4 knowledge tests that the apprentice is required to achieve, and all of that is done post gateway, and they have to attempt each of those knowledge tests within a very short 5-day window. If they fail, they have time to resit, but they have to be attempted within a 5-day window. So there are a lot of tight requirements, and it will be even more important to work with Just IT to support the apprentice through the EPA window. And then there is a project that will be required to complete, and then that'll be followed up with an interview. And again, it's a 3-month EPA window. Next slide, please. Digital support technician, again, alternatives depending on role. So Just IT are giving you the full coverage for all the different roles within your organisation at level 3, allowing the apprentice, regardless of pathway or apprenticeship, to then progress. So you have all those progression pathways made available to you, and Just IT obviously will support you through with that. So the focus of this is maximising the use of digital office technologies. Whether it be applications or service, it's making the most of those technologies. Again, this is quite heavy, not as heavy as the IT support technician, but fundamentally there are knowledge tests. There are 2. There'll be 1 core and 1 pathway specific, and then a case study, which again, similar to a project, presentation and interview. So there is a little bit of consistency between those 2 level 3 standards. A portfolio is still required, but again, it isn't marked, and it's only for specific knowledge, skills and behaviours. And this one, bizarrely, everything is 3 months or 4 months, but this particular one is a 12-week window. Next slide, please. There is a new cybersecurity technician, which is level 3. Again, it's to provide progression to the level 4, where the apprentice would then specialise. So you've still got that progression option there, and it may be, if they are new completely to cyber and they don't have a lot of technical skills as yet, that they start with a level 3 to then progress, but Just IT are best placed to evaluate your particular apprentices. So there are 3 assessment methods on this: scenario demonstrations with questioning, a professional discussion underpinned by the portfolio, but not, the portfolio isn't marked. The portfolio provides the assessor with key topics to discuss, because they can pull those from the portfolio to promote the professional discussion. And again, this one has a 3-month EPA window, and there is a knowledge test. Okay, thank you. DevOps level 4. This is very new, and it's proven to be one of the more popular new level 4 standards. It's basically to enable you to get software out as quickly as possible to improve any digital services, both internally and externally. There are 2 assessment methods. Now, this one is key. This is another quirk of this particular standard. They are required to carry out a work-based project, which they have received approval from BCS to do, and it must be carried out over 12 weeks, with the 13th week then preparing to present their project and their findings for a practical assessment. There is also the requirement for a professional discussion. This standard has no portfolio. There is no requirement whatsoever for the apprentice to put any documentation together as to what they've done on programme. However, as I said before, it is a recommendation that they do that to prompt the professional discussion, to remind them of what they've done, to enable them to talk about those particular areas during that discussion. And this one has a 4-month EPA window. Okay, next slide.
I think that's you done, Alison. So
thank you very much.
So if you want to stay there a minute for me,
I will loiter.
Couple of immediate thoughts, and I'm going to attempt to summarise just to prove I was listening carefully, and you can check to make sure I get it right. But before I do that, you've said that the new standards are live. In terms of the revised standards, do we have an indication of when they will come into effect in terms of new starts on programme? Do we know that yet?
This is I'm not going to give you the formal BCS response. I'm going to give you my personal response, because these obviously, as you're probably all aware, were due in November last year. It was anticipated they would be starting on the 1st of January. We've had the funding through, which I know you're going to be talking about momentarily. So that's a good indicator that these new apprenticeships, the revised apprenticeships, are going to be signed off. Once they have been signed off by the minister, then we're expecting an 8-week lead time into the start of the launch of those new standards. So from whenever that sign off is, we've got at least another 8 weeks before people can be registered against those new standards. Lovely. So we're not looking for anything till really April.
Yeah, and my understanding, the only possible exception to that was I did hear rumours that the infrastructure technician and the information communications technician may run in parallel for a period of 3 months. Do you think that's likely?
It may be, but I know that some of the people that we're working with at IFATE are not keen to have exceptions to the standard rule, but never say never.
Okay, superb. And just for the audience, we've shared a lot of information there. Some of those are standards that we don't currently offer, and obviously as an organisation, as with any other training provider, we're going to take a close look now at the various curriculum and assessment methodologies, and in due course we'll of course update you with the programs we intend to deliver and offer out to our client base. So here we go, Alison, here's the test. So what I've heard is there are going to be differing assessment methodologies, both currently but also per standard.
Yep.
We are fixed. You're going to tick these off and give me 10 out of 10. Yep. There is there's now a fixed EPA timescale stroke window, which again varies per apprenticeship, and uniquely we no longer have a straight pass merit distinction or refer. We now have the option for a resit where there's no new learning and a retake where there is new learning. Again, that has to be done within this defined EPA timescale, and we think there may be on certain standards limitations on the level of grade that you can achieve.
Yes.
Good. The next thing, although I don't think you mention it explicitly, although it's implied, I'm sure a lot of line managers who work with us will be delighted to know that the employer reference, which is quite a lengthy document, is no longer going to be required, although an optional testimonial can be submitted, which is a much shorter document.
Yes, and that can be included witness statements as well, which I didn't go into the details of, but witness statements and consolidating statements from employers, from managers and peers can also be included. So it's the nitty-gritty of each assessment plan.
Superb. The synoptic project in the main has been replaced by a business project. So in other words, the employer and the apprentice in conjunction with the training provider will come up with a practical project that means something to the business rather than necessarily a theoretical synoptic project. I know that's not true in every single standard, but I think generally that's the case. Yes?
Yeah, generally the case, but there may also be what was called historically a synoptic project in addition to that. So sometimes there are both.
Cool. And I think one of the other things that was very clear is that IFATE, by definition, the government no longer think that knowledge module exams and vendor certifications are going to be mandated within the programs in the main, and therefore not funded by the levy, although I understand, Alison, that BCS will certainly still offer knowledge modules, and I know that our partners like CompTIA will still offer vendor certification, but they would be kind of optional extras that training providers and employers would take a view on at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the added value that would come from the employer's decision, or obviously yourselves.
Yeah. And then the final thing which you alluded to, and this is literally hot off the press because it only got released this morning, so we didn't have time to add a slide in, is that some of the standards are having their funding cap adjusted, and obviously the 6 new standards will presumably already have funding caps assigned to them. But if I just quickly run through 6 of the existing standards, just to give you an indication. So the information communications technician is going to have a funding cap of 13,000 per apprentice, whereas currently the infrastructure technician is 15. The network engineer is being reduced to 16,000. It started at 18, came down to 17, is now going to be 16. The data analyst level 4 is staying at 15,000. The IS business analyst, which as Alice said, is going to be renamed the business analyst to give it a more general attraction, is going to be positioned at 15,000, whereas the current is 18. And both the software developer level 4 and the cyber level 4, which are currently at 18,000, are both going to be 17,000 moving forward. I think that's correct, Alison, yeah?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you again so much for your time. I'm going to move on now and invite Sam Tobin, who is our Service Delivery Director, and Julie Clark, who is our Curriculum Lead on our management programs, to do a similar update for you on their particular program. So I think, first of all, over to you, Julie, to talk about the management programs.
Hi, thanks, Richard. So, in leadership management, we've got no change to the actual standards, but what's happened with both the level 3 team leader supervisor and the level 5 operations departmental manager is the methodology of endpoint assessment has changed, and changed quite radically for these programs. Actually, the number of different methods of assessment, endpoint assessment, has reduced from 4 different components, activities at level 3, and 5 different components at level 5, and they've both reduced down to now just 2 different methods at both levels. I think one of the main challenges for training providers, indeed for endpoint assessment organisations and for the apprentices, was the lack of guidance around the required portfolio of evidence. And the portfolio of evidence is no longer needed. It's no longer assessed. I'll come to that in a minute. But feedback we got from learners and employers was that the one-to-one coaching sessions were quite heavily focused on planning for and collecting sometimes 50, 60, 70 pieces of evidence that were needed to cover every single learning outcome within the standard. Clearly, this was really time consuming for learners, and it's not what an apprenticeship should be about. It should be about developing individuals to be better leaders and managers that bring real improvements and benefits to their workplaces. So to that end, the new assessment methods from IFATE make a lot more sense. With just a very, very small portfolio, and the ILM guidance is no more than 20 bits of evidence are needed, and they won't accept any more than that. And like the tech standards, as Alison was saying, this is not actually assessed, but it is used to underpin a professional discussion at endpoint assessment. So the learner is going to talk about why they've done what they've done and how they've improved their leadership and management skills and behaviours. The second method of EPA for both the level 3 and the level 5 is a presentation on a work-based project that has a real business benefit. Now, at level 3, this presentation topic is going to be issued by the endpoint assessment organisation. In this case, we know we're talking about ILM, that's who we partner with. And the presentation topic will be guided by the type of evidence the learner puts forward and the type of role they're in. So if someone's role is much more based around managing process and procedure, for instance, the topic might be identify ways to reduce costs and increase efficiency in your workplace. If they're in more of a people manager role, it might be implement a performance management process within a team. So it's going to be individualised to the learner. At level 5, the presentation is based around a proposal for a work-based project of the learners and employers choosing. But again, something that brings a real benefit or improvement to the business. Again, all work towards those EPA projects have got to be completed after Gateway. So at Gateway, either ILM will allocate the topic to a level 3 learner, or at level 5, a project proposal will be submitted by the learner, and all actual work on that endpoint assessment project will take place between Gateway and the actual endpoint assessment date. The second impact of the change is in the marking and grading again. The old EPA, we had past merit and distinction grades available. And these grades were, for the leadership management programs, were based on the weighting and the marks gained in each of the 4 or 5 EPA activities. Also, apprentices only had to gain 50% of the marks in each method to actually gain a pass. Going forward, it's just pass or distinction grade available, and both of the assessment methods are given 50% equal weighting. All criteria has got to be met to get a pass. And there is very separate distinction criteria. This is clearly outlined in the new assessment plans. So the learners know exactly what they've got to do and what they've got to cover to gain that distinction grade. For me, as a curriculum lead, it's going to be really interesting to see how this impacts our EPA grades here, because at the moment, we've got an 85% distinction pass rate against 65% nationally. And certainly myself and the curriculum and coaching team here, we're working hard to ensure that this very high distinction pass rate is maintained. Again, similar to what Alison was talking about, any resets will only be able to achieve a maximum of a pass grade, whereas now a reset can get a merit or distinction. So that's the main changes around my new assessment plans and new assessment methods. Another new development we've got here in leadership and management is ILM have launched a new platform called EPA Pro, and that's going to manage the whole EPA process. Big difference here is both learners and employers, as well as us as the training provider, you're going to have access to this platform. And learners are going to get the chance to meet the independent assessor from ILM prior to the actual date, and they'll meet them online, have a planning meeting, they're calling it. And during that meeting, you'll agree and confirm the date for assessment between all of the involved parties. So a lot more ownership really for the learner and employer on that platform. A benefit for you as employers, you'll be able to see the schedule of EPAs clearly. You'll be able to track the progress of your cohorts much more easily. It gives a lot more ownership really of the EPA process over to learner and employer. That's about it for leadership and management. So I'll pass you over to Sam now for updates on project management.
Thank you very much, Julie. And as my slide might indicate, my update will be comparatively much shorter than those shared by Alison and of course Julie, because there are no major changes to the programme at this time. The big change, of course, for us in project management was the transition from Box 6 or the Body of Knowledge 6 to the Body of Knowledge 7, which took place last year or in fact the year before. And the update really there is from the APM themselves, who have extended the opportunity for apprentices to sit their PMQ exam on the Body of Knowledge 6 up until March 31st of this year. And that, of course, is in respect of the challenges through COVID, increased breaks in learning, so just giving that additional window of time to sit on the Body of Knowledge 6. Draw your attention to the 52% national pass rate, and this is in relation to the Body of Knowledge 7. So comparatively, pleased to share we're performing as within Just IT and Skills team at just above that percentage. However, it has significantly dropped in relation to what we saw across Body of Knowledge 6. So this is something that we are mindful of, that we are working very closely with the APM to monitor, and of course taking our learns changes to programme as a result. But yes, absolutely, as you'll see there, no real changes to the programme at this time. So thank you. I'm going to hand you back over to Richard, who I believe is going to now take us through National Apprenticeships Week. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated to you and Julie for that. And if you could stay on standby alongside Alison, I think we have some questions coming in from the audience. It will come to in 5 or so minutes. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to flag the National Apprenticeship Week is early again this year. It's from the 8th to the 14th of February. I know that we are doing lots and lots as an organisation. I think personally, I've already got 10 employers that I'm supporting across the week alongside my colleagues with various events, and we will be delighted to support any other employer with their activities to promote apprenticeships inside their organisations. You can see that this year they've come up with a theme for each day. and I'm sure my colleagues Alex and John in marketing will be sending out lots of information to you. But you can see on Sunday the 14th, for example, there is, show your love for apprenticeships and push it out through social media, particularly like the Thank You Thursday on the 11th. So plenty of opportunities there. I know some of our employers prefer to, because there's quite a lot of noise around Apprenticeship Week and feel sometimes that their voice might not get heard, they prefer to use the Learning at Work Week, which this year is the 17th to the 23rd of May. The campaign is Made for Learning. You'll see the National Apprenticeship Service campaign this year is Build the Future, which I think is very relevant because apprenticeships obviously going to have a huge part to play in us coming out of the implications of COVID and the impact on the economy. So whether you wish our support in National Apprenticeship Week, Build the Future, or Learning at Work Week, Made for Learning, we would be absolutely delighted to support you in promoting the good work that you do inside your organisations. James, I'm going to hand back to you to launch our second poll, please.
Thank you very much, Richard. So let me launch our second poll, which is, the question is, what approaches will your organisation take to its resource planning in 2021? So here we go. I'm going to launch the poll right now. So there's 4 or 5 different options for you to choose for. Please, please, please select one of those. We've got a few percentages coming in at the moment. So hiring new apprentices, using apprenticeships to upskill existing staff, short courses to train existing staff, use field term contractors, and we've got the final one there. So I'm going to close the vote in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me share the results with you. And 76% will be using the apprenticeship levy to upskill their existing staff, which we are seeing quite a few common trends since we've been hit with COVID-19. It's about maximising the current workforces that we've got in the economy to make sure we're saving and upskilling people in the correct way. So we've got some questions that have come in. Fortunately, we've actually had quite a few questions that have been answered. So I think off the back of that,
just before you go into those, can I just reference there in terms of that previous? If you'd just be good enough to go back a slide onto that previous one. Something else that you may not be aware of to the audience is the fact that there are. Clearly, because of COVID, we've had the misfortune, and I'm sure other organisations have, for apprentices to be made redundant through no fault of their own. And the government have put measures in place to support those apprentices. So if it would be lovely to think that the organisations out there listening today will be in a position to perhaps help some people who are partway through their programs by supporting them through to the end of their apprenticeships. And I believe there are some rewards in place, incentives, if you will, for doing that. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. I know the first question we've had, Alison, if you'd be good enough to kind of come back off mute. Thank you, James. We can come on again. One of the questions that's come in has been regards to if somebody started on the infrastructure technician apprenticeship, could they move over to the new information communications technician apprenticeship? Is there any mechanism to do that, as far as you're aware, Alison?
Yeah, technically, yes, there is. It really would depend on, obviously, the funding band would change. So there's the financial consideration. There is also the duration of how long they've been on programme, how long they've got left on programme, because even if they port to a new standard, they would still have to complete 12 months, we believe, on that new standard. So if they've been on the infrastructure technician standard for 11 months and they thought, well, actually, I'll port across, they would still have to do another 12 months on the new programme. Okay, so it's something really you need to think about carefully. For some of the higher level apprenticeship programs, for example, network engineer, then that has a more natural transition. Okay,
but if somebody had literally just started this year and then thought, oh, this new ICT is more appropriate, perhaps they started in December, January this year, then they could do that. So interesting answer, thank you. James, back to you. What other questions have have come in,
Yeah.
and obviously give us an indication of who you think would be a best place to answer that.
A quick fire one is it essential for someone wanted to do a team leader level 3 to have direct line management from the outset?
Julie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you. They would need to have some kind of exposure to setting and monitoring objectives for an individual. So they might not necessarily need to line manage somebody or, you know, sign off their holidays or whatever, but they would need to have that exposure to kind of supervise somebody and supervise the work for somebody.
So would mentoring and training and those sorts of things, perhaps running team meetings, would those sorts of activities be relevant, Julie?
Yeah, really, anywhere where they're going to set some objectives for somebody, allocate some work out, and they're going to monitor the progress towards and the completion of that work, of those objectives. So that, yeah, that could very well be with maybe if they're managing a small project and they've got some project team members where they're allocating some work out and other people are responsible and they've got to check up on that work.
Excellent, thank you. James, back to you.
Yeah, I've got one for Alison here. For software developer level 4, could the portfolio legitimately include examples done prior to the enrolment? And the basis of that question was this person who asked the question has got apprentices that have been employed since January 2021, so they've just come on board, who are waiting for the revised standards to be approved and cannot enrol them until on the old standard due to the Microsoft retirement of the relevant vendor qualifications, but don't want to continue the work to be unrecognised. So could they include some of the historical work in their portfolio?
Technically, it has to, the work that they do has to have been completed during the actual apprenticeship program. However, the portfolios on the new standards are not marked or assessed. So whether they include it within the portfolio for the new standard or whether they take that evidence with them to discuss you know, during the professional discussion is entirely up to them. So technically they could take it with them for that final discussion. It's not something that we would recommend they include in the portfolio for the submission, but yes, it can still be used and considered as evidence of their competence.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that answered your question. I've got just a couple of quick fire ones for management. We mentioned that the EPA is ILM for the management apprenticeship. Is there availability to change this EPA to another other than ILM? I believe that question was coming in.
Yeah, there is. We also partner with CMI as well. They're an alternative employment assessment organisation. You know, ultimately the decision lies with the employer to a certain extent who they would like to use for their endpoint assessment organisation. But I mean, ILM and Chartered Management Institute are the two biggies. They are the main ones, and we do partner with both of them.
Fantastic. And off the back of that, has there been a document been created for apprenticeships in general that shows a career path, so an apprentice can see how they can develop their career, so ideally used as a pathway or a guide to extending their career through apprenticeships?
I know, James, that certainly if the employer or the individual is interested, we can certainly share that information. There's some great documents on the government website, Institute for Apprenticeships. I know that BCS have some brilliant information on their website as well. So, you know, without knowing the specifics of obviously what progression the person is talking about, I suggest if they reach out to myself or yourself, then we'd be delighted to share that. So yes, there is, but obviously we just need to personalise it to the person who's asked the question.
Absolutely. We had a whole host of other questions, but I think they've all been answered with the amount of information and detail we've had on the webinar. So if you have missed anything or you couldn't write us quick enough to get some of the information down, everyone that joined the session today would get a copy of the recording so you can watch back in your own time. But equally, you have got the luxury of your account managers and the curriculum leads here at Just IT. So please, 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 we do want to keep hearing from you with regards to any questions and queries you've got. So we've got our general contact details, so our website, and obviously hello@Just IT. If you want to speak about wider business arms such as recruitment and training, but I would recommend, if you have got any further questions from today's session, then please do reach out to your relevant account manager and we will be happy to answer any queries you may have. We want to keep engaging with you on various topics. So as we normally do, we have a live webinar on a monthly basis. So hot off the press, here is the next one that is going to be coming down the line in March, the next one I believe, and that's going to be Thursday the 25th of March, same time at 12:30. And the subject is putting the learner at the centre of apprenticeships, which I think is absolutely key. And it comes down to, and it also falls into one of our questions we had earlier, how are we going to be able to make the learner sit at the centre of apprenticeships, but also see how the apprenticeships are going to be able to develop their career so we can start working out where the career pathways are. These webinars and questions and services wouldn't be possible without yourself. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that joined us today. Thank you for your participation, for Sam, Julie and Richard. And of course, it's been a pleasure as always to have you on board, Alison, to take us through the new adaptations and evolution of some of the standards, but also some of the new additions. So I would like to say thank you, and I wish you all a fantastic Thursday. Have a wonderful end to the week and a fab weekend, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon or catching you at our next webinar. Have a lovely day all. Bye-bye.